Hello, everyone. I'm Julius Francis from Juniper Networks. Today, I want to talk about the topic, the race to the edge, mainly around edge cloud, how edge clouds will drive 5G era revenue. If you look at the digital transformation that is going on, many of the network infrastructure operators are rethinking how they build, how they implement, how they operate their infrastructure. It is very critical because that is an important approach they would take to roll out the future services for enterprises and the consumers. Because their need is shifting. There's a greater need to have higher personalization, a greater collaboration, and also there's a need to have a lot of agility and low latency, high immersive experience need. What that means is now the infrastructure need to be built to react to that, right? In the past, many of them built the infrastructure to offer infrastructure services to monetize. I think as we get into the next era, the service rollouts were more of a scale-up era, right? People bought a vertically integrated type of application with the hardware, software, all integrated, optimized to deliver that services. Then many of them moved into this era of scale-outs, right? That's the era of telco cloud, centralized service delivery, mainly to get that economy of scale, right? Get the agility. But now, when we are moving into the edge cloud, that means it's a distributed telco cloud. What that means is how you operate and manage infrastructure with low latency, higher bandwidth type of application is critical, right? So with that, let's take a look at some other drivers that are driving, right? We all understand that there's a huge bandwidth on video. There's a lot of mobility. But apart from that, just look at the connectivity, just to show the sheer size of connected devices that's going to roll out, right? There are 20 billion connected devices. So many of these connected devices, they're not going to drive huge amount of bandwidth, but in aggregate, they're going to drive huge amount of IoT-generated data. The idea about, are you going to take this data all the way to your central location to process and make actionable insight, or do you want to keep it at the edge so that you react fast and also you don't burn up all the bandwidth in your backhaul, right? So a lot of these thinking and strategic thinking and devices need to be taken into consideration. There's a lot of local processing need to be captured and data, right? So with that, there's video growing up, these connected devices are coming up, and they're going to be generating new revenue-generating opportunities for the infrastructure providers. So before we talk about the edge, let's define edge. A lot of people think, where is edge? Edge is going to be more of a spectrum of locations, right? All the way from metro pop to pre-ag sites to base station and central offices. The idea of these various locations are getting virtualized is a need for low latency. How do you reduce the network traffic, improve security, and a lot of local control? But what would drive where to place the workload, it's about the use cases and the SLA that is driving that use case. For example, if you take a smart city type of use case, because of the broader geographic appeal, and if that use case have enough latency envelope for you to work on, you may be able to put that workload on the metro pop. But if you are a mission critical connected ambulance serving the patient with a remote doctor doing a procedure on that, you may want to keep that workload in a more close to the subscriber so that you will have a low latency type of appeal, right? So that is where the things is. So that's if you could see, you slowly started seeing the complexity of operating multiple distributed cloud aspect. So edge cloud in the part of the 5G transformation, so Gartner kind of states that by 2020, 30% of the service providers that have deployed 5G will have deployed the edge computing services because it is essential. Many of the emerging use cases demand that low latency type of appeal, right? And 50% of the enterprises who now put their workload in their centralized private cloud, into their multi-cloud in the public clouds, they will have them outside their traditional centralized location. What that means is this edge cloud location, not only that, the edge is also bleeding into their enterprise locations, right? The campus and branch are getting virtualized. So virtualizing this infrastructure is going to enable you to build a platform that is agile, that is built to offer services now, and also the services you are not even imagined yet, right? So what are the use cases defining these edges, right? If you take these two axes, right, the latency axis and the bandwidth axis, you could see the low latency, high bandwidth type of use cases are the prime for these type of edge location use cases. If you take on the far end, the remote battery sensors, you have sensors everywhere, the IoT connected sensors, and these sensors have a power constraint, right? You don't want to drain the batteries so that the operational cost of changing these batteries so often would go up. The idea is that these are very low bandwidth type of applications, but they will drive low latency because you want to keep them connected to a IoT gateway that is very close to it, right? So that you will preserve the bandwidth. On the other end, CDN type of applications with a high ultra type of videos with 8K, you're going to have reduced a lot of the applications driving a lot of bandwidth, but you may be able to live within the 50 millisecond type of ranges. Right now, if you drive any sensor data that need to be drive all the way to public cloud, it will take 200 milliseconds. You have to bring them into the realm of 5G promise of sub 5 milliseconds, right? Augmented reality, high immersive type of experience demands this. So these type of requirements on these latency and bandwidth is going to define many of the upcoming use cases and where you host the workloads. So here is the race to the edge, right? Everybody understands humongous opportunity, but many of these service providers who have been building this centralized telco cloud, some of them are far ahead, some of them are still in experimentation stage because when the pendulum swung from building a vertically integrated solution, they moved into these granular, consuming a lot of open source, consuming a lot of granular components from various vendors and trying to put them together, and they're in a challenge, right? The integration complexity goes up. The lack of life cycle management of both the infrastructure NFVI and the VNFs. Cost savings of that, the idea about is cost saving focus. That means we are focusing on the infrastructure rather than the revenue opportunity, right? The idea is infrastructure is a means to an end, right? How do you accelerate them faster to the revenue opportunity is the key. So many of the decision making of how you build infrastructure would be focused around that. And edge cloud, it's a play that many of them have experienced the same operational model. They want to bring it to the edge. But many who haven't really started off the experimentation may not go into that experimentation. They would probably consume pre-validated type of solution and move into the edge faster because it's a competitive space. I will talk about some of the revenue opportunities that comes with if you start accelerating this edge virtualization, right? Because when you really think about it, telcos right now sitting on beachfront properties, right? These are the real estates. They have base station, pre-ag sites. Many of the over-the-top providers, they have a centralized cloud data centers, but they don't have these real estate that can be virtualized that's close to the subscribers. So it has positioned many of the telcos in a very, very lucrative position. They also have these relationships with many of the enterprise, commercial relationships with consumers and enterprises. So it's a great opportunity for the telcos to co-create with delivering services, and also co-create with many of the over-the-top providers. So what are the edge cloud platform requirements? The idea is that some of these locations are space and power constrained, bro. So it's important, even the infrastructure, that NFVI type of infrastructure you bring in to the edge locations need to be reduced footprint, right? To save the power and power constraint. That means many of the functions to manage need to be centralized so that you will be able to manage thousands of edge locations, right? So centralized control, but do you want to distribute what you must without lacking any functional gaps? And you have to, then many would be focusing on container workloads. The containers provide that smaller footprint, fast start and stop type of agility that needed in the edge locations. And also these containers workloads need to be also have a lot of agents to monitor, to telemetry, so that you would be able to manage in a more predictable machine learning type of centralized analysis, so that you could do troubleshooting before it happens, because you don't want to send truck rolls to these thousands of locations. The network slicing. Many of these locations, all the services, need to be rolled out in a manner that they will be having a lot, the SLA, not only within the workload, but also go into the transport layer. And strong security, all the way from workload isolation to layer 4 to layer 7. And some of these sites live in an untrusted part of the network. How you bring IPsec security need to be well thought out. So these are some of the constraints and requirements driving some of the edge adoption. Just to talk about footprints, right? There are some approaches people are taking. How do you bring some of the vRouter, vSwitch, or some of the workloads into a more of a smart NIC, so that you could reduce that type of 8-core type of user space to processing right in the NIC. And also hyperconvergence, right? How do you bring that compute, networking, storage in this constrained, in a hyperconverged platform to save the space and power constraints? The container workload we talked about. The other aspect is you don't want to have the vRouter, vSwitch that are bringing high functions, also taking a lot of the compute, because you have to have compute and space for the workloads. So it's important of how you reduce them, the lightweight vRouter, vSwitch capabilities into a single core, smaller memory footprint type of applications. So I want to highlight these deployment scenarios some people are taking, just to bring out the complexity, right? All this time we have been thinking the telco cloud, the hyperscale telco cloud is a complexity, because the complexity within a data center, right? But you have been operating within tens of sites. Now you're moving into metro pops, you're talking about hundreds of sites. You're moving into even further edge of base station and pre-act sites, you're talking about thousands of sites. What that means is now this cloud infrastructure is getting distributed. You have to think about day 3, which is the operation first mindset is important when you take this type of architectural choices, because design implementation is what many people think through, but it's about day 3, because it's about operational first mindset, because it has to go not only beyond technology, of people and processes need to be tuned up to provide this type of architectures. The one area I want to touch is how many of them are playing with the CI/CD type of a model, because I talked about the complexity, how the operational first mindset, right? So in the past, many started with scripting and configuring, and they started doing some staging and validation before moving to production. But the infrastructure as a code concept has taken up, where you are managing infrastructure as a code. That means you are borrowing a lot of the software development principles into the CI/CD, where your code, build, test of continuous integration, where how you configure that infrastructure is built in. And then you go into the deploy and monitor That is the day 3 I talked about, the continuous delivery. This type of approach not only should be taken at the VNF level, because you are now talking with the ecosystem partners. You are driving this ecosystem through your pipeline into your delivery lifecycle. Lifecycle management need to be thought through. The idea is that it also need to be moved into the NFVI layer, right? The CI/CD, because you have to manage the lifecycle of the NFVI too. So this type of operational mindset is important when you make architectural and design choices to deliver this type of edge cloud. Now we talked about the infrastructure, how you design, how do you develop, and how do you roll out and operate. These are all means to an end. It's about making revenue, right? The idea is about edge cloud has provided an opportunity to create some monetizable new business models. Yes, many of them are looking at these opportunities to drive infrastructure type of services rollout, obviously, bringing agility and cost optimization. But think about the thing, you are sitting on this infrastructure, real estate that is the others can leverage. That means you can open up this edge platform to the over-the-top providers who can host certain application of them to the edge on your platform. The enterprises, they can take some of these augmented reality type of applications, agents right into your edge locations. That means they can connect to the public cloud. So what that means is open up the co-creation aspect I mentioned earlier. These are new monetizable opportunities. That means telcos and operators need to move fast, accelerate these deep deployments so that they could get into these type of models. It is definitely have a lot of opportunity in present, but if they don't move fast, many of these opportunities would bypass them. And so it's a great new business model need to be leveraged. Some of the use cases I wanted to touch upon before I conclude is apart from infrastructure services, many of them right now in the centralized telco cloud, they are deploying virtual EPC, virtual IMS, virtual BNG type of infrastructure type of services. And then also on the edge, they are considering the vRAN. These are infrastructure. But now there's emerging partnerships. Many telcos are partnering with a lot of their car manufacturers, put the dongle in their cars to provide telco connected car type of use cases. This is a new era of moving away from infrastructure and start monetizing various aspects. Sometimes in the case of connected cars, the idea about how to collect these sensors, how to make closed, fast, actionable insight decisions using AI and machine learning at the edge is as critical, and also how to go and augment many of these data and also move into a centralized cloud for some certain type of processing. It needs to be considered. So that's why when you talk about these type of use cases, it is not within a particular edge location. The use case need to be spanned across multiple virtualized data centers, be it multiple edge location, and also go across multiple public clouds. Smart city. We kind of talked about the smart city. There are a lot of industrial IoT use cases, the healthcare. I was at Mobile World Congress. They were looking at the connected ambulance use case. I mean, there are many use cases. They are well known. People are moving towards. There are others we don't know yet. So the important thing is about building these edge cloud, distributed cloud as a platform so that applications you can do in a more of a fast fail rollout, so you can service, innovate faster and move into a high monetizable opportunity. So given the fact that it is a real opportunity, it is a precursor to do 5G rollouts. With 5G and IoT on the horizon, I think the opportunity transform is here, and the distributed telco cloud is a means to that end of delivering localized services, low latency applications, bandwidth optimization, pervasive security, service agility, and it all starts with the edge. So with that, thank you very much. Appreciate all your time.